you said that you were moving from Office 2003 to 2010. What are some of the things you used to do in 2003 that were pretty much practice for you, normal?
Well, I used some keyboard shortcuts. Not a lot of them, but a few. There were ones such as Ctrl S to save. I learned that one the hard way. I learned how to save frequently, so I wouldn't lose
your data.
Exactly. And cut, copy, and paste. So I hope that those are still available in this. Are they?
They definitely are. Almost all our keyboard shortcuts are there.
Good.
And let's just take a look at a few of them just so you can see. You mentioned Ctrl S, and of course we know that does what?
Save.
It saves. So if I hit Ctrl S on the keyboard, then I have officially saved the document. Now this is just a file save, so it just overwrites the current file in its location with that file name. And I believe you mentioned cut, copy, and paste. So let's look at, for example, in cell A1, I have the title First Quarter Production. And you know what, let's do this. Let's do sales and expenses. Let's just take those two cells, A3 and A4. Let's say I wanted to paste that data onto the February sheet tab.
Okay.
Now, am I going to want to cut it or am I going to want to copy it?
Well, definitely copy it. I don't want it to go away from
We
here.
don't want it to go away. And I don't know if anybody ever told you. Now, you told me the letters for cut, copy, and paste, but there's a real easy way to remember which one's cut, which one's copy, and which one's paste. Cut is Ctrl X. Looks like a pair of scissors. So, you know, your scissors go. So you're cutting. Copy then stands for copy. C for copy. Ctrl C. And then paste is
Ctrl V.
Ctrl V. And it looks like the tip of a glue bottle.
Oh, okay.
So paste. You
That
got
makes
your little
sense,
Elmer's
yeah.
glue bottle, or some of you who ever have used glue guns or something along those lines. It looks like the tip of a glue gun. So we're going to use copy, obviously. So that would be Control C. And notice there's our moving marquee that goes around the cells. What does that moving marquee tell me?
That it is prepared to do something with it.
Right, it has actually put it on the clipboard. Now we're going to spend more time in another module looking at the clipboard and all the great things that you can do with the clipboard these days.
Good.
But that moving marquee tells me that it's on the clipboard now.
Okay.
And then I just go and select where I want it to go. Let's try the March sheet tab. And we're going to cell A3. And of course our keyboard shortcut looks like the tip of the glue gun, so it is
Control V.
Control V. And there we have it.
Perfect.
Now, if you go back to the January sheet tab, notice we still have the moving marquee because when we copy, that moving marquee stays there until we hit escape or choose to do something else. If we had cut, do you know what happens to the moving marquee when we paste?
Does it go away?
It does. It does. So your
makes sense.
cut, copy, and paste, and I just hit escape. Your cut, copy, and paste are still there. Cut is Control X, copy is Control C, and paste is Control V.
Good.
Now, there are several other keyboard shortcuts we can use, and there's quite a few, and so we're not going to get into all of them, but let me just show you a few.
Okay.
One of the ones we've already looked at today is the F2 key. Do you remember what that does?
Edit.
Yeah, I press the F2, and lo and behold, I have a cursor in the cell. Now, here's something I didn't show you earlier. Of course, I can use my arrow keys to move, but let's say F2 always puts the cursor at the end of the cell, the end of the cell. So I can press my home key, and the cursor immediately moves to the beginning of the cell, or I can press the end key and it moves to the end of the cell, or use the arrow keys in between.
So I have to make sure that I hit F2 first, and then I can use those navigation keys.
Right, I can navigate right there in the cell. So we know we have the F2, and let's see, a couple other things that we might want to do. I am working with a fairly small spreadsheet right now, but you had that large one earlier. And when we have large spreadsheets, a lot of times we come back and we want to input more data, and it's rows and rows and rows down, or columns down, or whatever. One of the things that we can do is we can go to the end of our range of data, and we would do that by holding down our Control key and pressing the End key. And notice it finds the last cell in the spreadsheet that has data in it.
Oh, that would be great if we had a very large spreadsheet. I wouldn't have to scroll to find that.
Exactly. It does help, especially if you want to put information in on the next row, then all you got to do, is hit enter and go to the beginning of the row. Do you know what key takes me to the beginning of the existing row?
I think I would use arrows.
Okay, you could. But let's say you're way out there in row ZA or something like that. That'd be
That would take
ridiculous. That would
forever.
take forever. So I can press the home key, and the home key takes me on that row to column A.
Perfect.
Of course, we talked about Control Home earlier. Do you remember what it does?
All the way to the beginning.
All the way to the beginning. So if I do Control plus Home, I'm back in cell A1. Now, I showed you Control End takes me to the end of the range of data. So when I select the End key, notice down in your status bar, it says End Mode.
Okay.
If you point to it, what does it tell you?
It says use arrow keys to move to the edge of the data range.
All right, so I'm going to use my arrow key. And notice it goes to the last cell on that row that has data in it.
So I have to hit the end and then use my arrow keys.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so that'll work for you that way. Okay, so those are several types of keyboard shortcuts that we can use. One that I find very useful that a lot of people I don't think are aware of. And I'm just going to come up here in cell E1. Sometimes we like to put our date and we want the current date. Well, I can do Control plus the semicolon and there's today's date.
Oh, that's a great
Isn't that pretty cool?
shortcut.
It's a very useful shortcut. And another one, so I do Control Shift plus the quote key and it copies whatever's in the cell above.
Oh, that's great.
So that can be useful for us too. Okay,
so if I have, let me just make sure I can understand how I would use this. So if I have something in the cell above and maybe I want to even copy that and I could go in and use F2 to add to it. So if I had maybe internal expenses and external expenses, then I wouldn't have to retype that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or if you have a database stored in your Excel spreadsheet and this particular column has maybe 3 or 4 options and the one in the row above has that option, you can just use the Control Shift quote key and it immediately will pull that information straight down.
That's useful.
Yeah, especially because you don't have to worry about typing and making any errors.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so there are a lot of keyboard shortcuts. Those are just a few that we can use and that we can be comfortable with. Are there any other things that you used in 03 that you would like to find out if it's here now?
Well, I did use Ctrl P to print.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, there's probably some that I didn't use that I just didn't know.
Right.
It would be great if somehow I could know what those icons are up above, what
Sure.
keyboard shortcut there is for that.
You know, in older versions, we had keyboard shortcuts for the menu, and those are still here. Our menus and our menu options, they're still here. We just need to press our Alt key to activate that. But before, you mentioned the Control P, and just so you know, Control P does bring us to the print, which is now in our backstage view.
Okay.
But it does bring us to the print option, so it is still definitely available to you.
Good.
So let me go back to Home, and what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is that you want to know how can I activate anything on the ribbon through my keyboard. Well, let's press the Alt key on our keyboard, and you'll notice that each one of the ribbons has a letter attached to it. So let's say I wanted to do something in page layout. There's a P there, so I'll just type my P.
Now, do I have to hold, it was a capital P, do I have to hold down my shift to do
You
a capital?
You don't. It's
good.
just the letter P. You don't have to worry about shift or anything along those lines. And notice now we are on the page layout ribbon, and I have various options here. And let's say, for example, that I want to do something with margins. Well, it tells me that's the letter M. So I press the M, and now I have my options for margins, and I can go from there. And even look at the bottom down there.
Oh, wow, it has where you can go into custom.
And I can press the letter A and set a custom margin.
That's great. Sometimes I have an external mouse that is not hooked up, and sometimes I run out of a battery. So I could use those if I'm in a pinch trying to get something done and not have a mouse.
Right. In fact, I have been in spreadsheets before and had my mouse freeze and not be able to use the mouse at all. And I was able to use these shortcuts in order to activate or close or whatever I needed to do at that point.
That's a great tool.
Okay. So we've looked at our keyboard shortcuts, and we've looked at the shortcuts for our ribbon. What other questions do you have?
I think that's it. I'm ready to learn some of those. That's great.
Good.